Hi everyone, how are you doing? So this is another video from me. This is 3 that I'm recording on the same day. So yes, I'm not changing my shirt. I know some people do that and they run down and they change a shirt so it looks like a different video. I'm not going to bother doing that because I want to get done before my kids get home from school. So, tell you about, let's look at a tale of 2 Chris's. We're going to look at Christopher Coleman and Christopher Watts. If you're not familiar with the case of Christopher Coleman, let me tell you this. Christopher Coleman, they lived in a suburb of Columbia, Illinois. And he is the son of a preacher. In fact, his mother is a preacher as well. So the son of 2 preachers. And he worked as a bodyguard for Joyce Meyer Ministries. Okay? He married his wife. He was in the military in the K-9 unit where he met his wife, Sherry. And he married her. Now the parents, I told you this in another video, they thought her skirt was too short or whatever, and they ran off and they eloped, and they said it wasn't the right kind of girl for Chris, but she ended up getting very involved in the ministry and doing a lot of things. But we see a similarity, right? The parents already, just from the get-go, don't like. Now they have 2 boys, Garrett and Gavin, and on May 5th of 2009, Chris Coleman gets up and goes to the gym. And on the way home, he calls his friend who lives across the street, okay, who's a police officer, to say, hey, I'm trying to reach Sherry, that's his wife, Sherry, who is 31, and she's not answering. Can you go see if something's happening? Well, they find out there is a horrific homicide. Multiple homicide, right? There was spray paint, helter-skelter style, Charles Manson style, all over the house, red, candy apple red. It said things like, punish, F you, you're going to pay, and then it said paid as they got up the stairs. And his wife and his children were strangled in their beds, and even things were written on the bed sheets on top of his sons in this red spray paint. They took him, they met him at the door, they said, right out of the house, and he had to go in an ambulance because he was sobbing and crying. And see, that's a contrast to Chris Watts, right? And I believe he noticed some scratches on his arms, so he started banging his arms on the gurney sides in the ambulance to try to explain them away. And then later he also said that they came from removing a satellite dish on his roof the day before. Well, he was brought in for questioning, and he was wearing a tank top where his scratches were very visible, so he asked for a blanket because he was cold. And I'm just giving you the Cliff Notes version, okay? And then I'll get into some details just so we can compare and contrast here. They grilled him. I mean, really grilled him. And you hear him, the video clarity is not so clear, so you can't see if there's tears, but he was trying to show this emotion. He would break out in sobs and then he'd, sniffle a little bit and then go right on to the next question. But they were really, really grilling him. It wasn't as friendly as Chris Watts was being grilled. They were, we know you did it. Come on, just say, really, badger kind of grilling. And he wasn't relenting, okay? They asked him about an affair. And in the meantime, they had another officer that found out about the wife's best friend from high school, who was this Tara Lintz. This agent went down to St. Petersburg for what she thought would be a very short interview, right? But it ended up that this Tara started giving her all this information, showing her all these pictures. She found out that this Tara had a wedding date set, and that Chris had told her, she said, that he was getting a divorce on this very day the murders occurred. And so she got quickly back with the investigators. They started telling him about this affair. Prior to this, he said that their marriage was good. They had some communication errors, but they talked to Joyce, and they got into some counseling, and things were fine. And he wasn't admitting, right away to this affair. He walked out of there a free man. He remained a free man for like 2 weeks. He didn't stay at his house anymore. He said he couldn't take that. So he went in with his parents, where he was arrested 2 weeks later at night. And of course his parents don't believe he did this. And he went to trial, which took 2 years to build the case. Okay, and that's one of the things they say. The prosecutors said, there was 10,000 pieces to put together. And that's what I believe we're doing with this Watts case. We're trying to put together what should have been put together for a trial. And that's what is really baffling a lot of us, because we see all this. Now, if they took 2 years to get information together to build the case for the trial, because there was 10,000 pieces that just didn't fit together, you can see why some of us are really, interested, invested, looking at this, because the pieces are not coming together for us. And we're trying to do that, building this case up for a trial ourselves, because he took this plea deal. Okay? Well, Christopher Coleman didn't take a plea deal. And the mistress came into court in her high heels, and they said it was like she was a Hollywood actress arriving, because she had this whole police entourage. And all these pictures started to come out, and all of these sexy videos that he was making. In fact, he was even pleasuring himself in the shower for her in a video that his parents said, they needed to, I guess, pray for help to sit through all that, because they sat through all that and they didn't want to get out of the courtroom, because, and I believe this is what happened, what the reason why, is because that would have made it seem that they were ashamed of their son. And they wanted him to know that they were not ashamed of him, and that they forgave him, and everything was good. So I believe that's why they didn't go out of the courtroom. And someone described the motive as his lust for Tara, who was the mistress, his money, because he had a 6-figure income working as this bodyguard, and there was a zero tolerance policy in the Joyce Meyer Ministries. If it was found out that he had cheated, he would be let go. He really wanted his wife to file for divorce and leave him, scot-free, but she wasn't going to do that. She wanted to fight for her marriage, because she did apparently find out about Tara. She showed a friend a picture of her husband and Tara and said, I'm going to fight for my marriage, which he didn't like. They would go to counseling. She said he would put on this mask in front of the counselor, and when they got home, there'd be hell to pay. I heard other things from friends that he started treating her very disrespectfully, where she asked him to get her something, and he said, get it yourself. I think he called her a bitch or whatever. Okay, and there was 1 or 2 jurors that were on the fence, okay? And what they noticed is they had these pictures, these photographs of Chris and Tara. Now, they had said that their affair started, I believe they had said, in November of 2008, and yet the time and date stamp on the back of the photos told a different story, told that it happened earlier. And they saw that with a magnifying glass. Now, apparently that should not have been there, and that's what they're trying to get this appeal on, because he's filed an appeal, I believe it was May of 2018, because of that, and because of some other sexual things, like the pleasuring himself in the shower video that came in, that he said, prejudiced the jury, and the other thing with the date should never have been in there, and it's not right. And because the 2 jurors did say that seeing that date and seeing that he lied about that, then he would lie about something else, and so they came and back and deliberated and found unanimously guilty for the 3 counts of first-degree murder. Now, there was a death penalty. They were able to seek the death penalty, but there were 2 governors, or there was a governor coming in, and there was a moratorium on the death penalty. So it's been phased out. It didn't really make much difference, but Chris waived the jury to decide his fate and left it up to the judge. And the judge felt that life in prison was a worse punishment that he would be in that cell for the rest of his life than the death penalty. So he sentenced him to life in prison without parole. Now Chris, I believe, filed an appeal in 2014, which was denied, but now he's filed another appeal, okay, about this time and date stamp, and that was in May. And I haven't been able to find any further information about approval or denial of that. I'm going to keep searching. But there's a lot of intricacies in this Chris Coleman case. We have the Mistress. We have this Chris that is showing more emotion, okay? He shows definitely more emotion, whether, it's fake, put on, of course. That's strange. That's a helicopter flying over the house. That doesn't usually happen here. I wonder what's going on. Okay, let me just let that go away because it's making a lot of noise. All right, so we have Chris Coleman. We have parents that believe him, that he's innocent, right? Parents that didn't like the wife. The little boys seem to be great little boys, very well loved in their community. And definitely this was premeditated. In fact, one of the neighbors was saying that the boys normally sleep over, and I think it was one of her children's birthdays, and she was talking to them on the phone, and they said, "Can we sleep over?" And she said, "Of course." And they came right back and they called her back and they said, "Dad won't let us tonight. He said we have to stay home." And she thought that was really weird, and that happens to be, that was their last night alive. So what this case is, there's a lot of premeditation in this case because there were death threats coming through emails starting in November, starting right around the time of the affair, okay? First they were coming by email, and what he was saying is that, somebody was targeting Joyce, and because they can't get to Joyce, they were going to get to this bodyguard and his family. And he was the only one getting these threats. Okay, they were coming by email, and he was documenting them, and they were getting more and more specific and stronger threats about killing. Always, I don't even think it ever mentioned him, but killing his wife and his children. And then they started to come right into the mailbox and get really, really graphic. And so the police officer that lived across the street decided to install a security camera that pointed right at the mailbox to catch the guy. But he must have told Chris. And so the last threat that came by via the mailbox was in April, about a week, I think, before these murders. So there was this elaborate, it was like almost 6 months, right? Because it was like November of 2008. And the murders were on May 5th of 2009, and the verdict was handed down on May 5th, 2011, exactly 2 years to the date, okay? So yes, this case has a lot of similarities. It was not a bloody crime, but it was horrific, like they said, because of all of the helter-skelter painting that was on. It was even on the kids. He had a wife that fought back very hard. In fact, they said she had black eyes, and he had those scratches on his arms. So that was different. But they didn't find any DNA evidence. They didn't find key evidence. It was a lot of circumstantial evidence. And they also found a glove with the spray paint on it, discarded along the route from the house to the gym. They thought it was weird that he could do all this painting with this spray paint and not have a drop of it on his body. But they found a receipt for a True Value hardware store for 1 can of the Rust-Oleum Candy Apple Red, exactly what was painted in there. And they did a handwriting analysis, and that matched up. So they had all of this information. They had the Mistress. So they said, this was about, the prosecutor didn't believe his mistress. The prosecutor didn't believe his mistress had anything to do per se with the actual murder, but as being a motive, yes. And they had a wedding date planned out. She had wedding dates. He said that their first child was going to be a little girl, and he already had a name picked out, and they were living in this fantasy world, and he used to fly her in when he would go on location for Joyce. He would have her flown into his location, and again, he found something, let me see, there's something, like that, take my breath away, I've never felt this way. He did the same thing about how he felt for this Tara, that, nobody ever made him feel like this kind of thing. Let me see. So when Tara testified, let's just look at this first. She said that Sherry and her were best friends in high school, and they stayed in touch thereafter. Tara knew Chris, but their relationship became more than friends in November 2008 when she saw a defendant at a Joyce Meyer's Ministry conference. Sherry called Tara and told her to go to the conference, which was being held in Florida, where Tara lived. Thereafter, she and the defendant talked on the phone and texted constantly. Their relationship became physical in the middle of December 2008 when the defendant dropped off Joyce Meyer in Florida so Meyer could go on a cruise. Tara then met the defendant at a hotel in Orlando. Tara testified she communicated constantly, and in May 2009, they both professed their love for one another. In fact, he had given her a promise ring prior to May 2009, okay? He had given her a promise ring which she wore to the trial, and prosecutors asked her, and she did respond to that it was the promise ring that he gave her. In addition to meeting at the hotel in Orlando, they also met in Arizona and Hawaii while the defendant was on business for Joyce Meyer's Ministry. Tara testified that she stayed in the defendant's hotel rooms and had sex with him during these trips. Tara testified that she and the defendant planned on getting married after he divorced Sherry. Oh, and he said the divorce was going to be on the date that they ended up being killed. The plan was for Tara to move to Illinois. Tara testified that she and the defendant got matching promise rings. Tara was wearing hers at trial. Chris told Tara that he talked to an attorney about getting a divorce, and the divorce papers were being prepared, and he was scheduled to pick up the papers from the lawyer on Monday, May 4th, 2009, and he was going to give them to Sherry and ask her for the divorce. Chris did not give Sherry divorce papers on May 4th, explaining to Tara that he was unable to do so because Sherry's name was spelled incorrectly. And so he asked that the attorney correct the typo, and the papers would be ready to be picked up on May 5th. That was the day they were murdered. Tara testified that she and the defendant planned to go on a cruise to St. Thomas in June, and the tickets had already been purchased with his personal credit card. They found out that Tara and he already had their own bank accounts and credit cards in their names. So when we talk about NK, think about that. She testified that she had talked to the defendant on her cell phone in the evening of May 4th and texted constantly throughout the day and evening, but stopped texting at about 10:30 p.m. when defendant told her he was going to bed, and she didn't have any more communication with him until the morning of May 5th. Who does that sound like? Does that sound like NK? Tara was a cocktail waitress. Okay, so the defendant's father called her. That sounds interesting too. For some reason, it sounds like they liked the cocktail waitress, even though who knows if he even told her she was a cocktail waitress. But whatever, the defendant's father called her. That sounds like an NK situation. Called her at 10 a.m. and told her that Sherry and the boys had been murdered. Tara testified the defendant texted her while he was being interrogated at the police station, and called her later that evening after he left the police station. That's eerily familiar, isn't it? 2 days after the murders, the defendant called her again while she was talking with Illinois detectives who came to Florida to question her. When she told the defendant she was being interviewed, he said, "Oh, really? Interesting." Either she told defendant or defendant told her that the police were looking for a motive. She did not talk to the defendant again. On cross-examination, Tara said she was aware of 4 threatening letters defendant had received, and one was received approximately 18 months prior to the murders. So, yeah, hold on. It might be, I'm sorry, I may have given you the wrong date. I believe the letter started November of 2007. I have to figure out about that. And that's, I know it was a long time, so I was thinking like, wow, that's a long time to plan this, right? A long, long time. But that would have been prior to, see, that's another thing. That would have been prior to him meeting her. And then that's what the jurors said. They saw some photos from a prior time that were really, they were really comfortable with each other. Let's say that. So their affair could have started way back when those threatening emails started, or prior to that. 18 months prior to the murders, Tara acknowledged that she received sexually explicit photographs from the defendant's brother, Keith, and that Sherry's brother contacted her via social media and asked her to marry him. That's an interesting twist. She also acknowledged taking a cruise with another male, Jesse, in December of 2008, and she used defendant's computers on occasion. So one of her friends from Tampa, Florida, one of Tara's friends, Elizabeth McNeil, testified that she lives in Tampa. She was friends with Tara in the fall of 2008 and spring of 2009, and she was aware that the defendant and Tara were a couple. She testified that approximately a week prior to Christmas 2009, the defendant was in Florida and went to the Cheesecake Factory with a group of about 10 people, including Tara and McNeil. Michael Grist, a crime scene investigator employed with the Illinois State Police, testified he took photographs and collected evidence at the crime scene on the day of the murders. He collected footwear impressions, his latent fingerprints, and samples of red spray paint from writings on the wall. He testified there were no signs of forced entry. And we do have that Christine Sincata testified that she was good friends with Sherry, that's the wife, and she was employed at Joyce Meyer Ministries, with the defendant. At the time of her testimony, she was still employed by Joyce Meyer Ministries. Well, Christine, this friend, testified that Sherry sent her text messages in late December 2008, in which Sherry informed Christine that the defendant wanted a divorce because defendant believed Sherry was messing up his work life. Christine testified she went out with Sherry in January 2009, at which time they discussed the defendant's desire for a divorce. Prior to Sherry contacting Christine about Chris's desire for a divorce, the defendant contacted Christine in approximately mid-December 2008 as part of her job at Joyce Meyer Ministries. Christine handed the ministry's cell phones, and defendant sent her a message in which he stated that Sherry sent him some provocative pictures on his Joyce Meyer Ministries issued BlackBerry, and he wanted to know if those pictures could be seen by the ministry's staff. Christine was not sure if the pictures could be seen, so she checked with Joyce Meyer Ministries' technical staff and was told that no one at Joyce Meyer Ministries could see the pictures, so she advised the defendant. Wow, did you see that? So his mistress must have sent them to the wrong phone. And so he blames his wife, tells his wife's friend who works at the Joyce Meyer Ministries that, hey, Sherry sent me these pictures to my phone. I need you to find out if everybody can see these. And then finds out they can't. And now, this friend knows this. So let's see what the friend does. After Sherry sent her text messages about the defendant's desire for a divorce, Christine got suspicious. Good, Christine. Told her brother, who also works for the ministry, about her conversation with Chris. And her brother then informed Daniel Meyer, Joyce Meyer's son, who also works for the ministry. Daniel told her to check the defendant's phone, which she did, and the records revealed that the defendant had made many phone calls and sent many texts to Florida, to a number in Florida, and then he had received many calls and texts from that same Florida number. It was Christine's understanding that Daniel Meyer was going to follow up with the defendant. Christine testified that Joyce Meyer Ministries' policy regarding employment after an adulterous affair is such that in most circumstances they probably wouldn't be allowed to work there anymore if they were having an affair. And Christine knew of one employee who was terminated for that specific reason. On cross-examination, Christine said that she was aware the defendant and Sherry received counseling with Mike Shepard, a pastor at Joyce Meyer Ministries, and Sherry told her that she and the defendant were doing better after the counseling. Christine admitted that as far as she knew, the defendant was a good father. He actually was seen through that neighbor's camera playing baseball on the lawn the day before the children and his wife were killed. But I know I was reading something else. I'm not going to go through all of this. This is a lot to go through. But that Sherry had seen pictures on her computer, maybe through his email, of her friend Tara and showed it to one of her friends. So she was aware. So where, I think this was a longer affair, and it was planned out for a while because these threats went through for a long time. They started in email. And we can go through the Coleman case, and I'll probably veer that off to another video where we can discuss just the Coleman case. But right now I just wanted to give you just some details so that we can discuss what the differences are and what the similarities are. He wasn't caught as quickly as Chris Watts was. That was instantaneous. But there were also a lot of mistakes he made, again, because his mind was on the end game and not on the details in between, and so mistakes were made. Purchase of the spray paint, he used a credit card, they had his signature on it. But there was still just a lot of circumstantial evidence, okay? So that's why he's trying to file this appeal, because of what this time date stamp, and he says other things prejudiced the jury against him. He's lost 30 pounds in jail. He was a guy that was working out too, okay? He was working out like Chris, probably eating healthy, all that good stuff. He was really into the sex, and he said, if he was guilty for something, it was kind of selfish, but he was looking for what he wasn't getting at home or something, he told the investigators, but he didn't kill his wife. But he maintained he did not fall into any of the interrogation tactics where Chris we know, went, they got him right away. He was very easy. This is what I say, I don't think Frazee is going to be easy like Chris Watts. I think he's going to be more like this guy. This guy was just adamant. He would get frustrated. He would show a lot more emotion in the interrogations. Like I said, even if it was fake sobbing, he was sobbing when he should. He was getting frustrated at the questions. Chris just sat there. You could answer. I could talk all night. He was just low key. Remember? So there were differences there, yes. And there were differences in that this guy had time to create the crime scene, okay? He created a scenario that he was being threatened. There was somebody that was coming in. He thought this was great, right? Put that spray paint all over. He made this elaborate ruse, but he left the glove on the road. He had the scratches on his arms. The mistress immediately was found. He had that motive. He had the money, lust, murder, all of that, adultery in there for that. So there are similarities. They had mistresses. The mistresses knew they were married. They knew they had kids. They were planning on marriage. They were planning on having a life together. In fact, he and his mistress, like I said, ended up having bank accounts and credit cards together, and they were known as a couple where Tara lived amongst her friends and stuff. So it wasn't as hidden, and he, this one's planning this baby girl and the name and this and living in this fantasy world, and they have promise rings. Now he probably, could you said he would have got a divorce if he had a regular job and would not have killed his kids? Okay, but what kind of guy is going to kill his kids over his job? Okay, why not just go try to get another job? They said that he had thought about opening a gym or starting his own security agency. Why not? When you're thinking about that, are you thinking, oh, yeah, I don't want to give up that job, but I'm not happy, I want to get a divorce, but can't get a divorce because then I'll lose my job at Joyce Meyer Ministry, so then the next logical thing is that I just annihilate my family. Okay, so yeah, things like that, sloppy things that they left, except this one here, there was a lot more text messages and videos that were recovered and brought out in the trial, and we don't know, do Asians have more stuff that they have on Chris Watts, but there are definite similarities, but there are definite differences in this case. He seems much more assertive than Chris was, not as quiet, not as subdued, not as emotionless, and he knew when he should show emotion for things. Even, like I said, if it was fake tears, or fake crying, fake sobbing, he at least did that sobbing, okay? And he didn't fall for the interrogation tactics, even though they seemed even more intense with him. You can watch the videos, they're on YouTube. And so, yeah, I think there's definitely some similarities. And then you've got the parents, and the parents seem, their son can do no wrong. They said that when they left the trial, that they left very quiet, and they let him know that he loved them. I don't know if they came, I have to do some more research, if they came out and said any more about not liking Sherry. I know that I read it somewhere that this stuff was said. Now, if it came from them, then they are doing it like the Watts. I don't know if they're doing it as spitefully or as vicious as the Wattses are. I have to look into that, so I won't say that. I know I heard it somewhere about the parents not liking her. I have to find out the source, so I won't say that they're saying it, because I don't know 100% that they are. They don't think their son did this. Sherry's mother and her brother is Mario. They're fighting, they fought for justice for her, and then her father said, can you call this a happy day when he got his sentence, when he was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. He said, you can't really call it a happy day, because it's not, because they shouldn't have to be doing this at all, right? Anyway, there's lots of similarities, lots of differences. Discuss with me about this, and then let me know if you'd like me to take a deeper look into the Chris Coleman case and go through some more stuff, or is that enough? Let me know what you think about that, and let me know if you've heard of this case and your insight, and let me know if you've heard about if the parents badmouthed Sherry the way the Wattses have done to Shanann. And I will talk to you guys very soon, but I have to go now. So have a great one, and I hope that these videos are helping you to understand the case, or just providing some insight on different cases and helping you go through this discovery. Have a good one, guys. I will talk to you very soon. Bye-bye.